Welcome back. From wildfires to flash floods, extreme weather is damaging and dangerous and expensive. Here's a look by the numbers. This year's wildfires already make it the second worst season on record. So far, 7.4 million hectares have burned. That's double the 10-year average at this time of year. In the worst year for fires, back in 2023, 230,000 people had to evacuate their homes. 5,500 fires burnt 17.3 million hectares of land. The cost that year was enormous, $945 million in insured losses, but the effect on local economies was also severe. The businesses affected by the Jasper fire accounted for 10% of local GDP. Meanwhile, flooding costs $2 billion in structural damages every year, making it the largest natural disaster in the country annually. It's expected to get worse thanks to rising sea levels and heavier rainfall, and due to the fact that in 2024, 80% of Canadian cities were located in a floodplain. Last year, insured damages across Canada from severe weather added up to more than $8 billion, triple the insured losses of the year before, and 12 times the annual average of the previous decades. Those losses also cost more in insurance. Since 2019, property damage claims rose 115%, while rebuilding costs jumped 485%. Well, as insurance costs rise, more and more people may struggle to afford it, making the future even more precarious when it comes to extreme weather. Craig Stewart is Vice President of Climate Change and Federal Issues at the Insurance Bureau of Canada. Thanks for being with us, Craig.
Good to be here, Amanda.
So we all see this happening. Of course, it's the effect of changing weather, and we've seen the insurance industry responding, but it is only moving in one direction. What's the future look like when people actually find themselves uninsured, as we're seeing already in some parts of Canada and certainly across the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly getting worse and worse. We're seeing more events. We're seeing more catastrophic events in this country, and we're seeing more insured losses. What that means for Canadians is, look, insurers have done reasonably well. They managed to still return value to shareholders despite that incredible, unprecedented $8 billion in losses last year. But they've done that by basically being more selective in what risk they take on. They're reducing their risk concentration in certain areas, playing with the product, reducing coverage limits. And what that means is that the risk is being passed on to, everyday Canadians, you and me, as well as businesses and governments. And that's what we need to think through, is what do we do about that residual risk that is increasing and that insurers just aren't going to pick up?
In the past, the insurance industry has played such a central role in helping us mitigate risk. Fires in homes are way down because the insurance industry insisted that we build in ways that were better insulated against fire. Can we do that with extreme weather, or is it just too big a problem?
We can absolutely do that. And it's already happening, but it's not explicit. So, insurers have moved out of high-risk flood areas. The top 10% of homes in this country aren't insurable. They can become insurable if governments invest in risk mitigation, flood defenses, to lower that risk to a point where it meets an insurer's risk appetite. Similarly with fire-smarting communities, if we want high-risk wildfire communities, a wildland-urban interface in BC and Alberta, if we want to keep them insurable, we're going to have to invest more in fire smart, enabling those communities, those municipalities to make the right decisions to lower that risk. So yes, there's a lot that we can do.
And of course, people we count our personal property, the private property. There's a whole lot of public, what we would call kind of self-insured or uninsured risk in the infrastructure we all rely on. Who's responsible for that? The roads, the bridges, the sewers, everything that really the taxpayers really do have to support.
At the end of the day, the taxpayers are bearing most of that cost. Most municipalities in this country self-insure their infrastructure. There is not that much reinsurance take-up in Canada, unlike in some other countries. And as a result, it's really the taxpayer that's on the hook. And that's why it's so important that if we're going to increase building in high-risk areas in order to meet our housing crisis, for instance, that we think carefully about where are we going to be putting those roads, those bridges, that stormwater, those new stormwater management systems Do we really want to build new communities in undefended areas when really at the end of the day, it's the liability is going to accrue back to those governments?
Of course, one of the issues we have is that this is a global problem. Insurance companies offset their own costs and risk in a global market. Might you see that changing over time, where we actually see the reinsurance market picking and choosing the places it will play because of this kind of shared risk? Some parts of this world are worse than others.
It's already starting. Started with Lloyd's of London back in 2019 that readjusted its exposure worldwide, including in Canada, pulled out of the Canadian commercial market almost entirely. Luckily, they've come back a little bit, but we've already seen reinsurers begin to adjust their exposure. Instead of spreading the peanut butter evenly around the world, they're basically saying, nope, we don't have that appetite in certain parts of the world. And Canada tends to be, unfortunately, particularly Western Canada, one of those areas, as is the US, as you can imagine, places like California and Louisiana. So that means that there's less reinsurance in these areas, and that affects the availability of insurance as well.
So the doomsday scenario, and you're going to hate that I raise it, it's a bit like yelling fire in a crowded theater, but are we headed towards a world where it is an uninsured world, which is really kind of the dark ages economically?
Insurers absorb risk throughout the economic system. They play a vital role there. And we are, so far insurance is widely available across Canada, but we are seeing this sort of slow boil situation where they're shedding risk in the places that are, the most, frankly, predictable of having these catastrophic events. And so what we're starting to see is like the agreement that Quebec signed with the federal government on June 2nd, which was essentially to say if insurance is either inaccessible, unaffordable, or inadequate, then they're basically saying we're going to pick up the cost for the first $385,000 per property. So free insurance, taxpayer funded free insurance to everybody where insurance isn't available. Feds pick up 80% of that, Quebec picks up 20%. So the industry is watching these deals because essentially it's capitulation. It's saying, you know what? We're building a taxpayer-funded system in expectation that it's going to become more difficult to insure. In our view, we should be doing more to invest in risk mitigation, reducing the risk, keeping places insurable, rather than pursuing taxpayer-funded schemes like this. But we'll see what happens. So
good to have you, Craig. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amanda.
Craig Stewart is Vice President of Climate Change and Federal Issues at the Insurance Bureau of Canada. Coming up, trade talks continue between Canada and the U.S. We'll look at what might still be at stake. That's still ahead. But first, Bick's Pickles have found themselves at the center of the debate about what makes a product Canadian. The pickle company was founded here in 1951, then purchased by a U.S. firm along the way. The cucumbers are still Canadian, but they're now shipped south for processing and bottling, and that gets them hit with Canadian retaliatory tariffs, even though Bick's is a lot more Canadian than a lot of products slipping under the radar. It's evidence that decades of North American supply chain integration has put some companies, well, in a pickle. We're back after this.